Looking for something to read? Well, these are the books that I've written. Hop on down to the description to find the Amazon links for all 4 of them, and keep your eyes open for more in the future. With that said, on to the video. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni viewer, and it's time for the next episode of GAMERA REBIRTH, simply entitled Kill, which introduces Giron and also has arguably the best line in the whole series, which goes something like, "Every helicopter I get near blows up. I can't take this anymore." Yeah, a little self-awareness here and there isn't that bad. It's only when it gets to recent Marvel levels that it gets annoying. And speaking of irritating, I actually want to zero in on Joe for a moment, not because I think he's annoying, but because I actually think he is a better version of Haruo Sakaki from the Godzilla Polygon trilogy. Just hear me out on this. Both characters, you may notice, have a baseline personality trait of always being kinda ticked off, and aggressive, and just generally miffed. But here's the thing. While Haruo didn't work, I think Joe does. Haruo, just to summarize my thoughts that I've expressed in other videos, Haruo's baseline idea of always being just filled with rage, the reason that didn't work was because his situation, well, there are a lot of reasons why it didn't work, but one of the big reasons was because his situation was not unique. The beginning of Planet of the Monsters made it very clear that everybody on board that refugee ship was suffering equally, and they all had reason to despise Godzilla for sending them packing and fleeing to parts unknown. But Haruo took it to unhealthy levels. Sure, you could argue maybe he was being slightly manipulated, but he wasn't really manipulated that much. Metphius zeroed in on him because he was already that angry. And the way he expressed that anger so outwardly, and how he never had anything else to his personality at all. He just always was angry and always wanted to kill Godzilla and couldn't do anything else. Even to the point where, after going through all 3 of the movies, he was still there and had not developed so much as a little bit. That just made him completely unlikable. There's nothing wrong having a character who is angry at their circumstances and can't let go of that anger easily, but Haruo was not the right way to do it. Joe, however, is an improvement. Yes, similar to Haruo, he's always got this sort of simmering irritation to him. Like, something's always at the back of his mind that's just keeping him from being completely happy. And even as far back as episode 1, we saw our first little hint of it, where we saw that there was a shrine in his house, which, if you ever have seen an anime before, you know that always means someone in the family is dead, at least one person. And in the background, we saw his dad, unshaven, sloppily dressed, drinking, staring blankly at a TV screen. So we didn't get a full explanation right off the bat, but we could tell something wasn't right at home. And this episode properly explains it. He lost his brother, he lost his mother, his father completely gave in to despair, so he's had to work a job in order to support both of them. And now we understand. First of all, Joe's situation is unique to him. There are no other characters we follow in this series who have a similar situation but are just dealing with it, whereas he's going over the edge. We can understand why he would not seem like he's a contented person, because he's experienced loss and responsibility at levels that someone his age arguably and ideally shouldn't have to go through, and yet he has. He's had no choice but to go through them. And it's also more understandable that he'd have a harder time keeping his emotions in check because he's a kid. Kids generally do not have the same kind of filters that adults do. So if they're angry, they're going to express that anger, and they don't care what you think or if it's inappropriate. Contrast that with Haruo, who is an adult. Well, physically he's an adult. Clearly, emotionally, he's a toddler. But anyway, I hope that I've properly explained that. Joe is not necessarily a great character, mind you. I wouldn't say any of the human cast in Gamera Rebirth is going to be fondly remembered as some of the best the series has ever produced, or even that the genre has ever produced. But none of them, not even the one who is most similar to Haruo, are unlikable. And they make improvements on things that the Polygon trilogy just wasn't able to pull off. Which makes it even more amazing that it's one of the same guys and a lot of the same crew who are working on this. It really does go to show that maybe Seshita was right, and Toho really was the reason that the trilogy turned out the way it did. And another thing that makes Joe a better character than Haruo is because he's got people he cares for. I mean, Haruo claimed he cared about his grandfather and that he cares about all of humanity, but the way he goes about expressing it by committing an act of terrorism in his introductory scene that would have arguably killed a lot of people, that doesn't back up his claims. Joe does everything because he's looking out for Boko. I did refer to him as a sort of big brother archetype in the first episode review, and we still get that sense that this is the case, even when they're arguing, and apparently this is the first major fight they've ever had, but they're still able to reconcile at the end. Joe doesn't let his anger get the best of him. He's not necessarily wrong about not trusting the Foundation, but he does recognize the part he had and remembers why he and Boko were friends to begin with. So, again, huge improvement in terms of character. But of course, this is where Giron makes his big return. And man, Giron is acrobatic. The way he just flings himself all over the place when he's attacking. And amazingly enough, they managed to work in his ninja stars. And it's not even the sort of thing that we would question. It's just one of his powers. I mean, we're already in a world with a flying turtle and a laser shooting shark and everything. Why not just have him do that? It's not exactly the same as what they do in the movie. In fact, at first I thought it was a laser, but every time they land somewhere, we see it's an actual physical object. So it's kind of surprising that they managed to include that, especially since when they first teased his appearance, they didn't even hint at that. They just hinted at him having a huge knife for a head, and that's what he uses. I also noticed that his depiction is kind of canine, the way he moves around, the way he's searching out for his targets. He's a hunter like Zigra, but a different kind of hunter. A shark and a dog hunt different ways. Anyone who is a dog owner and has watched Shark Week will be able to tell the difference. And that's another good portrayal. I think it's good to see how even when they're using the same or similar concepts for different monsters, the show finds a way to put different spins on them in order to not make them feel like it's all just one monster with a bunch of different designs. I have to acknowledge that. It's a good move. But moreover, Gamera takes a ton of damage in this one. He loses his arm, which is a callback to the Heisei trilogy and how it ended, but he also loses an eye. And he gets stabbed. Again, calling back to the Heisei trilogy. I'm curious to see, one, how he's going to recover if he does, and two, if they're going to bother explaining it. I mean, they might not. They might just say he regenerated between episodes and just leave it at that. I mean, clearly he wasn't harmed so badly that he couldn't go into flying saucer mode, which is another thing. Flying saucer mode is apparently an attack in this interpretation, not just his primary means of transportation. That's an interesting way to incorporate it. I'm also wondering if he's going to turn out to be the UFO that they saw in the flashback where we learned how Junichi met the two of them in the last episode. It's probably not going to be the case, but I don't know. I'm just spitballing. Something else that's dawned on me since doing the last video is that even though this is a Gamera series, and I do believe that tonally and visually and everything, it does work as an interpretation of Gamera, the way the episodes are structured almost feels like Ultraman. By which I mean, we have the whole episode go by where we have the characters doing their thing, they're being pursued by the monster of that particular episode, and then the hero shows up at the end in order to save the day, and pulls out some kind of crazy attack to defeat the monster. That is classic Ultraman. I don't know if that was intentional. It probably was, because Ultraman is a pretty big deal even to this day. Not just Blazar, but like any interpretation. So I can understand why there might have been a bit of influence there. I don't think it detracts from the series, mind you. I think that the way the episodes are structured, technically speaking, it does work. That being said, it is different from the Gamera movies, where Gamera is a presence throughout those films. And yes, there is a final battle, but there are other battles and other scenes with Gamera in some form or another prior to then. So it's working okay for Rebirth, I will say that. But if and when we get a new version of Gamera after this, I would like to see them return to the more traditional interpretation of having Gamera be present throughout, or at least earlier than the finale. But otherwise, that's all I have to say on this episode. It was good. Giron definitely makes an impression, and I don't just mean by slamming the knife blade of his head into the ground. And we'll see what happens next. Clearly, I'm thinking Viras is going to be in the next episode. They're going to find a way to revive him. And we'll see what happens when he shows up. But until such time as that happens, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Thank you all for watching. If you want to see us keep doing what we're doing, you might consider doing all the usual YouTube things, as well as hopping down to the description to find links to DeviantArt, Patreon, Twitter, and links for the different books in the Tales from the Omni Vault universe. Your support is naturally appreciated. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.